Mark Langley never thought his quiet life on the colony planet of Terrace 9 would ever be interrupted by anything out of the ordinary. It was a peaceful place, nestled in the outskirts of human space. The planet was a minor research outpost, inhabited mostly by scientists, engineers, and a handful of alien species working together. The colony's daily rhythm was simple. Wake up, work, eat, and then go to sleep, just like any other human settlement. Nothing remarkable ever seemed to happen here. But then, there was the mail carrier. Mark had never really given much thought to the idea of intergalactic mail. He'd only ever had one courier, Currix, an alien from the insectoid species known as the Hexynoth. Currix was an efficient worker, arriving precisely at 10 a.m. every morning, handing Mark his letters, and then promptly flying off to the next delivery. The Hexynoth were known for their punctuality and dedication, and Currix was no exception. For the most part, Mark didn't think about Currix much. He was just the person who brought the mail, and Mark had never bothered to learn much about the species. But recently, something strange had been happening. Currix's visits had become different. At first, it was subtle, small changes in their usual routine. Currix began pausing longer than usual at Mark's door, seemingly lost in thought as they handed over the mail. There were times when Currix would buzz their wings nervously, and their antennae twitched in a way that seemed out of place. Mark assumed it was just an odd quirk of the Hexynoth species. Perhaps Currix was having a bad day, or maybe they were just getting too comfortable with their routine. But it was when Currix started bringing flowers that Mark began to notice something truly unusual. It wasn't just any flowers, either. They were glowing, bioluminescent flowers with soft purple petals that seemed to shimmer under the colony's twin suns. Mark had no idea what they were, but he knew they weren't from any plant on Terrace 9. Currix didn't say anything as they handed over the flowers, only offering a polite nod and a few words in their alien tongue, which Mark didn't fully understand. The first time it happened, Mark smiled awkwardly and thanked Currix, unsure of what else to say. Maybe it was a cultural gift, an alien custom he wasn't familiar with. He accepted it, placed the flowers in a vase, and went about his day. But the next morning, Currix arrived again, this time with more flowers and an odd shimmering object that looked like a small, delicate ornament. It was clear that this wasn't just a coincidence. For the next several days, Currix continued to deliver strange, glowing gifts along with Mark's regular mail. There were soft chimes made from what Mark assumed were insect wings, little figurines crafted from metal, and even a beautifully woven silk scarf. Currix would smile at him, clearly pleased with the attention, but Mark had no idea how to respond. He wasn't sure if these gestures were meant as gifts or if there was some deeper meaning behind them. He hadn't exactly asked for this kind of attention, but he didn't want to offend the alien either. It wasn't until one particularly strange day that Mark began to suspect something wasn't quite right. He had just finished his breakfast when he heard the usual buzzing sound of Currix's wings outside his window. As he walked to the door to collect the mail, he was greeted by Currix holding something completely unexpected, a large bouquet of flowers that were even more radiant than the previous ones. But this time, there was something else, something that made Mark freeze. Currix, with an almost nervous look in their multifaceted eyes, handed over the bouquet. "Mark," Currix said in their gentle clicking voice, "I have something important to say." Mark blinked, confused. Currix was usually so reserved, so professional. What could this be about? But Currix only smiled, their wings fluttering nervously. They stepped closer, a faint scent of sweet, floral pheromones filling the air. Mark's heart started to race, unsure of what was happening. Something in Currix's behavior felt different today. It was almost as if the mail carrier wasn't just delivering mail anymore. They seemed too eager, too focused. Before Mark could ask, Currix took a deep breath, and in a tone that almost sounded like a confession, they said, "I believe we are well suited for each other, Mark. My people, we." Mark's brain stopped. He stared at Carix in confusion, the flowers in his hand now forgotten. "Wait, what?" Mark asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and confusion. What on earth was Carix talking about? But the mail carrier only smiled again, their antennae twitching nervously. And that's when Mark realized that maybe, just maybe, the situation was more complicated than he had ever imagined. Mark stood frozen, the bouquet of glowing flowers still in his hands, his mind struggling to catch up with what Carix had just said. His mouth went dry as he stared at the alien mail carrier. Carix, standing in front of him, was acting different. The usual professionalism was gone, replaced with a nervous energy Mark had never seen before. "I believe we are well suited for each other, Mark," Carix repeated, their voice soft but clear. "My people, we court during the mating season, and I have chosen you." Mark blinked, feeling like the world had just tilted on its axis. "What?" he managed to say. You've chosen me." But he shook his head, not sure what he was even trying to say. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Surely, Carix couldn't mean what Mark thought they meant. Carix, clearly not noticing Mark's confusion, continued with an almost hopeful look. "I have watched you for many cycles, Mark. You are kind. You care for the flowers. You keep your dwelling clean. You." The insectoid alien paused, as if gathering the right words. "You are worthy. I wish for you to be my mate." Mark felt his face flush, his thoughts spinning. He glanced at the flowers in his hands, suddenly unsure of what to do with them. "I think there's been a mistake," he said, trying to sound calm, though his heart was racing. I don't know what you mean, Carix. I'm not looking for a mate. It's just a misunderstanding." Carix's wings fluttered nervously, their eyes blinking rapidly. "It is not a mistake," they said, their voice a mix of confusion and certainty. "The signs are clear. My instincts are strong. This is the season of mating for my people. And you are the one I have chosen." Mark's mind raced. He couldn't believe this was happening. Carix was an alien, an insectoid species whose biology was completely different from his own. How could they even think he would understand their courtship rituals? But then it hit him. The glowing flowers, the strange gifts, the way Carix had been lingering longer than necessary at his door. It was all a part of this mating season tradition. Mark had just been too naive to realize what was going on. He let out a deep sigh, trying to think of the best way to handle this delicate situation. "Carix, I don't know how to say this," Mark began, carefully choosing his words. "I'm flattered. Really, I am. But I'm human. And I don't understand your ways. I'm not sure I can be what you're looking for." Carix tilted their head, clearly puzzled. "But you are everything I need. Your species, you are known for your intellect and your strength. You have created great cities. You have conquered the stars. You are capable of much. And you have a kind heart." Their antennae twitched again, and they stepped a little closer, as if seeking some kind of confirmation. "It is true, isn't it? You are a good match for me. Your people, they understand the importance of loyalty, yes, of partnership." Mark felt his stomach twist. He could see Carix was struggling to understand. They didn't mean any harm. They were just following their instincts, as they had been taught. But this was more than just an awkward cultural misunderstanding. This was about an alien species, deeply ingrained in its own mating rituals, and Mark was completely out of his depth. I think I need to learn more about your species, Carix," Mark said, trying to sound calm. "I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I don't know if I can be the right person for you. I mean, we're from completely different worlds. Different biology, different everything." Carix's wings drooped slightly. For a moment, Mark thought they might take offense, but instead, Carix looked thoughtful. "You are right. Our ways are very different. Perhaps I have rushed things, but this is how my people do it. When we find someone who resonates with us, we do not wait. We act. Mark exhaled slowly, his heart still racing. This was a lot to take in. Crix wasn't just confused. They were serious. This wasn't a joke or a misunderstanding. This was about their biology, their instincts, and their way of life. Mark had no idea how to help Crix understand that humans didn't work this way, especially when it came to relationships. But he also realized that just dismissing Crix might be worse. He couldn't just push the alien away without explaining things further. Okay, Crix, let's talk. Maybe I can understand better. But you need to understand that humans, we don't have the same way of thinking about relationships. We need time to get to know someone. We don't just jump into things. Crix blinked again, their eyes reflecting a mix of confusion and hope. You would talk with me, they asked softly. You would try to understand my ways. Mark nodded. Yes, but we need to take it slow. No more gifts, no more rushing into things. We need to talk, and I need to learn about your species. Is that okay? Crix's wings fluttered in what Mark could only guess was a sign of happiness. I will wait, they said. I will wait as long as it takes. Mark sighed in relief, feeling like he'd just dodged a huge bullet. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Crix wasn't going to give up easily, and Mark had a feeling that this talk would lead to a lot more confusion and a lot more awkward situations. But for now, it was a start. Mark sat at his desk, trying to focus on his research, but it was almost impossible. The sound of Crix's wings buzzing outside his window had become a daily occurrence, a constant reminder of the strange situation he had found himself in. The alien mail carrier had kept his promise to take things slow. Sort of. Crix had been respectful, but their attempts to talk were still as awkward as ever. Every day, without fail, Crix would show up at his door, the usual bundle of letters in one hand, and now, an assortment of small, glowing gifts in the other. The gifts had become more elaborate, bioluminescent shells, delicate woven patterns, and strange, iridescent stones that seemed to hum softly when touched. Mark had no idea what to do with any of it, but he accepted it with a polite smile each time. The worst part, Crix had started to hang around even longer. Instead of leaving after handing over the mail, Crix would stand there, sometimes shifting from foot to foot, their antennae twitching nervously, waiting for Mark to say something. Anything. Mark wasn't sure what Crix expected from him, but he was beginning to feel like he was trapped in some kind of cultural exchange program, one that he hadn't signed up for. One morning, Mark opened his door to find Crix holding a large, intricate sculpture made of shiny metal and crystal. The alien beamed at him, wings fluttering with excitement. I made this for you, Crix said, their voice nearly trembling with pride. It is a symbol of our connection, a bond that could last forever. Mark's brain went into overdrive. Crix, He stopped, not sure how to explain that humans didn't typically form lifelong bonds with someone they barely knew. But before he could say anything else, Crix stepped closer, their scent, sweet and floral, filling the air around them. Mark's head spun. He had never felt more out of his depth in his entire life. Look, I really appreciate the gifts, Mark said, trying to stay calm. But you're going a bit fast. I told you, I'm not ready for this. I don't know if we even understand each other yet. Crix's wings drooped, their antennae twitching in confusion. But I have followed all the proper steps. I have shown respect for you, for your customs. I have been patient. Mark ran a hand through his hair, feeling a headache coming on. I know you've been trying, Crix, but it's not about following steps. It's about learning and understanding each other. I'm not rejecting you. I need more time. The Xyneth mail carrier stood there, silent for a long moment, before finally speaking. I do not understand. In my culture, when we find someone who is right for us, We move quickly. Time is a luxury, not to be wasted. And I have been waiting so long for you. Mark felt a pang of guilt. Crix wasn't being unreasonable. They were just following their instincts, their cultural beliefs. But Mark wasn't sure how to get through to them without completely crushing their feelings. I'm not saying we can't get to know each other, Crix, Mark said gently, his voice steady. I'm just saying that we need to slow down. We need to learn more about each other, to understand each other's worlds. Otherwise, it's not going to work. We're from two completely different species. Crix's antennae drooped even further, and Mark felt a rush of sympathy. I will try. I will learn your ways, Crix said softly, stepping back. But I cannot promise that my instincts will quiet. The mating season, it is very strong within me. Mark nodded. I get that. But maybe we can try to focus on being friends first. We'll take it slow, okay? There was a long pause before Crix's wings fluttered again, this time with something that resembled a sigh of relief. Friends, Crix repeated, as if tasting the word. I can do that. Mark felt like he'd just avoided a disaster, but deep down, he knew that wasn't the end of it. Crix wasn't going to give up that easily, and no matter how much he tried to explain, he knew that Cyneth's instincts would keep pushing them forward. Later that afternoon, Mark went to the colony's eye assistant, hoping to get some advice. He found Rena, a Cyneth biologist who worked with the colony's research team, and told her about the latest developments. You've been patient with Crix, I see, Rena said with a knowing smile. But I must warn you, Mark, that the mating season for Cyneth is intense. It's not something they can easily turn off. Perhaps you should learn more about their traditions. It might help you understand their perspective better. Mark felt a weight settle in his chest. I don't know if I can keep this up. Every time I try to explain myself, Crix just keeps coming back with more gifts. More gestures. And it's all happening so fast. Rena nodded sympathetically. I understand. But I believe Crix really wants to make a connection with you. It's just their way. And I'm afraid it might take time for them to fully understand the human perspective on relationships. Mark sighed. Well, it looks like I've got my work cut out for me. As Mark left Rena's office, he couldn't help but wonder if this was ever going to end. He had no idea how to handle an alien's romantic advances, especially when they were wrapped up in centuries-old traditions. But one thing was certain, his peaceful, quiet life on Terrace 9 would never be the same again. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster for Mark. Every time he thought he had made progress with Crix, the alien would come back with more gifts, more attention, and more confusion. Mark had tried to explain himself as best as he could, but the language barrier, both literal and cultural, was far more complicated than he'd anticipated. It was a quiet morning when he received a new surprise. Crix was standing outside his door again, but this time, they were holding something different. It wasn't a glowing flower or an intricately designed sculpture. Instead, Crix was holding a bundle of what appeared to be books. Mark raised an eyebrow as Crix handed over the stack. These are for you, the alien said shyly. I thought perhaps these will help you understand our ways more. They are about my people's history, our culture, and how we court. Mark blinked in surprise. Books? He hadn't expected this at all. But Crix, I don't even know if I can read this. Crix's wings fluttered nervously. I will stay with you while you read. I will explain. We can learn together. Mark felt a surge of guilt and curiosity. At least Crix was trying, really trying, to make this work. Maybe it was time for him to understand Crix's perspective better. All right, Mark said, taking the books. I'll give it a shot. But I'm still going to need some time to process all of this. Crix's wings buzzed with excitement. Yes. Time is good. Time to understand. As the days passed, Mark and Crix spent more and more time together. Each day, Mark would read a little of the books Crix had brought him. trying to learn about the Taineth culture and the strange, complicated mating rituals that came with it. It wasn't easy, but Currix was patient, explaining things in their own language and translating the confusing parts into something Mark could understand. Mark quickly learned that the Taineth weren't like humans at all when it came to relationships. Their mating season was a time of great importance, driven by powerful biological instincts. The books explained how once a Taineth chose a mate, they would dedicate themselves fully to them. No hesitation, no second thoughts. The concept of taking things slow was completely foreign to Currix and their species. As Mark read, he couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. How could he, a human with his own culture, his own expectations, ever hope to match Currix's intense feelings? They were from two different worlds, two different biological systems. Could he really help Currix understand the human approach to relationships, one built on mutual understanding, trust, and time? One evening, Mark sat with Currix on his porch, the sun setting behind them as they talked. The air was cooler now, and the buzzing of the colony was a soft background hum. Mark had just finished another chapter of the books, but he wasn't sure if he had made any real progress. "I'm trying to understand, Currix," Mark said quietly, turning to the alien beside him. "But it's so different from what I know. I don't even know where to start." Currix looked at him with large, concerned eyes. "You do not have to understand everything all at once," they said. Just be with me. Take your time." Mark felt a knot form in his stomach. "But how much time do we have, Currix? You've told me that your mating season doesn't last forever. How long can I really expect to keep saying no before I let you down?" Currix's antennae drooped slightly, and they let out a soft sigh. "I do not wish to rush you, Mark. I do not want you to feel pressured. But I also cannot hide what I feel. I have chosen you. And in my heart, I believe we are meant to be together." Mark's heart softened. He could see the sincerity in Currix's expression, in the way they spoke, the way they treated him. Currix wasn't trying to force anything. They just didn't understand why Mark wasn't feeling the same urgency. "I know, Currix," Mark said gently. "But I need time. You and I are from completely different worlds. I need time to figure out what this means for me." Currix nodded slowly, understanding in their gaze. "I will wait. As long as it takes, I will respect your time. And I hope, in the end, you will see what I see." Mark smiled faintly. "I'm not sure what I see yet, but I'm willing to keep trying. I want to understand you, Currix. I really do." It was a small step, but it was progress. Mark didn't know what the future held. The path ahead was still full of uncertainty, and he wasn't sure if he could ever truly meet Currix's expectations. But for the first time, he felt like they were on the same page, moving forward, not as strangers, but as two beings trying to bridge a vast cultural gap. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step in the right direction. Days turned into weeks, and Mark's life continued its strange dance with Currix. While the initial awkwardness hadn't fully disappeared, something had shifted between them. They weren't just an alien mail carrier and a human anymore. They were two beings who had slowly begun to understand each other's worlds, even if the divide between their cultures was still vast. Mark had continued to read the books Currix had given him, and with each page, he uncovered more about the Taineth way of life. Their biology, their customs, their rituals, all of it was fascinating, but also overwhelming. The Taineth took their connections seriously. Their mating season wasn't just a physical need. It was a deep spiritual calling. Currix had chosen him not only because of their instincts, but because, in their culture, they believed that a true bond could form between two souls who connected across any barrier. Mark couldn't help but admire Currix's dedication. No matter how much he tried to explain his human perspective, Currix always accepted it with patience, their wings fluttering gently in understanding. But the more Mark learned about the Taineth, the more he realized how much harder it would be to find a middle ground. One evening, As they sat together under the stars, Mark felt the weight of the situation more than ever. Carix had been speaking excitedly about their home planet, describing the sprawling cities and massive starships that had taken their people to the far reaches of the galaxy. Their voice held a note of longing, and Mark couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Carix had chosen him, but Mark still wasn't sure if he could meet their expectations. "I've been thinking a lot about your people, Carix," Mark said, his voice thoughtful. "I've been reading a lot about your history, your culture. It's incredible." Carix's antennae twitched with pleasure. "You are learning. I knew you would. You are intelligent, Mark. You will understand me, in time." Mark smiled gently, but a small frown tugged at his lips. "But I'm not sure if I can ever truly understand. Your ways are so different from mine. I'm just not ready for what you're offering." Carix's wings drooped slightly, and they lowered their gaze. "I know you are not ready, but my instincts tell me that we are meant to be together. I will not pressure you, but I hope you can see that this is not just about the mating season. It is about more than that." Mark felt a surge of sympathy. He knew Carix wasn't just acting out of impulse. There was a deep, profound connection in the alien's mind, a bond that had existed for centuries among their people. For Carix, this wasn't just about attraction. It was a cosmic certainty. "I want to understand, Carix," Mark said quietly. "But I need more time. I can't rush into something like this. I'm human, and my culture doesn't work that way." Carix's wings fluttered in thought. "I understand," they said softly. "Time is different for you. I will respect that. But I hope that, in the end, you will see that our bond is not a matter of time. It is a matter of the heart." Mark nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. Carix was genuine, kind, and patient, but Mark still wasn't sure what he felt. He liked Carix, he really did. But how could he reconcile the growing affection he felt for them with the knowledge that their biology and instincts were pushing them towards something much bigger? The next morning, Mark woke up to find a new surprise waiting for him at his door. A small, delicate flower with translucent petals that shimmered in the light, surrounded by a faint golden glow. It was a gift, no doubt, but this one felt different. It was almost like a sign, a symbol of Carix's feelings. Mark picked it up carefully, his heart racing as he thought about the alien's words. "I'll never understand this," he muttered to himself, "but I can't keep ignoring it." Just then, Carix appeared at his door, as they usually did, holding another bundle of letters. But this time, their eyes were softer, their expression almost vulnerable. "You? Like the gift?" Carix asked, their voice filled with quiet hope. Mark hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to hurt them, not after everything they had shared. "It's beautiful, Carix," he said gently, "but I need to talk to you." Carix's antennae twitched, and they stepped forward, their wings fluttering slightly. "I will listen, Mark. I want to hear your heart." Mark took a deep breath. He had been putting this off for so long, but it was time to be honest with Carix. "I appreciate everything you've done for me, Carix, but I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for the bond you're offering. I just need more time, more understanding." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Mark thought Carix might turn away in disappointment. But instead, the alien reached out and touched Mark's shoulder, their eyes filled with something Mark could only describe as deep empathy. "I understand," Carix said softly. "I will wait. I will give you the time you need. But I promise you, Mark, when you are ready, I will be here." Mark smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't an answer, not yet, but it was a step forward. And for now, that was enough. Weeks had passed since Mark and Carix had reached the fragile agreement of giving each other space. Mark kept reading the books Carix had given him, learning more about the alien's culture, but his feelings remained tangled. He wasn't sure what to do next. Carix had been patient, even more patient than Mark thought an alien could be. But Mark still wasn't ready to commit. The weight of their differences pressed heavily on him, and though he appreciated Kirix's devotion, it wasn't enough to make him leap into something he wasn't sure he fully understood. One crisp evening, as Mark sat by his window, sipping a cup of tea, he found himself thinking deeply. What was he really afraid of? Kirix had been kind, respectful, and above all, understanding. It wasn't as if he was being forced into something, but still, there was an overwhelming sense of doubt that he couldn't shake. Mark stared out at the horizon, the soft hum of the colony in the distance. Suddenly, the quiet air around him was interrupted by the familiar sound of wings fluttering. He turned to see Kirix standing at his door, holding yet another package. This time, it was a small, beautifully carved box, covered in intricate symbols Mark hadn't seen before. Mark stood up, trying to mask the nervous flutter in his chest. "Hey, Kirix," he greeted, forcing a smile. "What's this?" Kirix's eyes glowed with excitement as they handed over the box. "This is something from my homeworld, Mark. I wanted you to have it. It is very special to my people, a sign of respect and care." Mark took the box carefully, feeling the weight of Kirix's gesture. Inside, he found a small, delicate necklace made from shimmering metal and an unfamiliar stone that seemed to glow faintly. Mark's fingers brushed over the cool surface of the stone, and he couldn't help but feel a strange warmth spread through him. There was something incredibly personal about this gift. Kirix hadn't just given him a trinket, they had given him a piece of their culture, a symbol of their affection. "This is beautiful, Kirix," Mark said softly, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "I don't know what to say." Kirix's wings fluttered gently, their eyes gleaming with sincerity. "You don't have to say anything. Just wear it. When you wear it, you carry a piece of me with you." Mark felt his heart race. The gesture was so raw, so full of emotion, it was impossible not to feel the deep connection Kirix was offering. Despite everything, despite all his uncertainty, Mark couldn't deny the pull he felt toward the alien. I will wear it," Mark said quietly, his voice softening. "But Kirix, I need to ask you something." Kirix tilted their head, wings still, their attention fully on Mark. "Anything, Mark. You have my full attention." Mark hesitated, his thoughts swirling. He had been trying to understand how this could work. His mind had been clouded with doubts, fears of what it might mean to step into a relationship that crossed not just cultures, but species. But now, looking at Kirix, he saw the genuine kindness and devotion in their eyes. For the first time, he realized that Kirix wasn't asking him to be something he wasn't. They were asking him to trust them, to take a step forward, and to embrace the unknown. "Kirix," Mark began, his voice steady now. "I've been thinking a lot. I've been confused, unsure of what to do. I'm not sure I'm ready for everything yet, but I don't want to push you away either." Kirix stepped forward slowly, their antennae twitching in anticipation. "Mark, I have never wanted to pressure you. I understand that your ways are different, that you need time. I am not asking for everything all at once. I just want the chance to show you who I am." Mark looked at the alien, his heart feeling both heavy and light at the same time. The truth was, he did want to know Kirix more. He wanted to understand them better. He was starting to see that maybe he didn't need to have everything figured out right away. Perhaps all that mattered was taking small steps and letting things unfold naturally. "You've been so patient with me," Mark said, his voice filled with gratitude. "And I've been so uncertain. I'm sorry if I've made things difficult." Kirix smiled softly, their wings fluttering in a gentle gesture of reassurance. "You do not need to apologize, Mark. I know that I ask a lot of you, but I also know that together we can learn and grow. That is all I ask for." Mark felt a weight lift off his chest. The constant pressure he had felt, the fear of making the wrong choice, was starting to melt away. Maybe he didn't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe the only thing he needed to do was take a chance and trust that things would work out, step by step. "I think," Mark said slowly, "I'm ready to take that chance. I don't know where this will lead, but I want to find out. With you." Carix's wings buzzed with joy, and for the first time, Mark saw a look of pure happiness on their face. The alien reached out, gently taking Mark's hand in their own, and Mark couldn't help but smile back. The bond wasn't formed in a single moment, nor would it happen overnight. But Mark realized, as he stood there with Carix, that he was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. Whatever came next, he would face it with an open heart, ready to embrace the unexpected journey ahead. Mark stood at the door, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The days had gone by, and his relationship with Carix had slowly shifted from a confusing whirlwind to something that felt right. He wasn't sure where the future would take them, but for the first time in a long while, Mark felt at peace. Carix had been patient, understanding, and kind. They had given Mark space when he needed it, and they had been there when he was ready to open up. In return, Mark had finally started to feel that he could trust Carix, not only as a friend, but as someone who genuinely cared for him. They had faced their differences, and Mark realized that those differences didn't have to be obstacles. They were just part of what made them who they were. The last few weeks had been filled with little moments that meant a lot. Quiet conversations, shared smiles, and even moments of laughter when Carix tried to imitate human jokes. It was these moments that had helped Mark let go of his doubts. He didn't have to fully understand everything about Carix's culture, and he didn't have to rush into something he wasn't ready for. What mattered was that they had found common ground, and in that, they had begun to build something beautiful. "Mark." Carix's voice called from the other side of the door. Mark turned to see the alien standing there, holding a new parcel, their wings shimmering softly in the fading light. "Hey, Carix," Mark greeted, stepping aside to let the alien in. Carix entered the house with a bright smile, clearly in good spirits. "I have something special for you today," they said, offering the package. Mark smiled, taking the parcel from Carix. "What is it this time?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Carix's eyes sparkled with excitement. "It is something we do for our closest companions," they explained, a gesture of trust and bond. Mark raised an eyebrow, unsure what to expect, but he carefully unwrapped the parcel. Inside, he found a small, intricately crafted pendant, a charm shaped like a small star surrounded by a delicate ring. It wasn't anything extravagant, but the way it glowed faintly reminded him of Carix's eyes. Mark looked up at Carix, his heart warmed by the simple yet profound gesture. "It's beautiful," he said quietly, touched by the meaning behind it. Carix nodded. "It is a symbol of connection in my culture. The star represents a bond that cannot be broken, even across the stars themselves." Mark's chest tightened with emotion. He had been unsure, uncertain of where things were going, but this felt different. For the first time, he could see the bond Carix spoke of. He could feel it, not as a distant idea, but as something real between them. "I don't know what to say," Mark said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't fully understand your ways, Carix, but I do understand this, what you've given me, and I don't take it lightly." Carix's wings fluttered softly, their gaze softening. "You do not need to say anything, Mark. This is not about words. It is about trust, and about being together in this moment." Mark took the pendant in his hand, the cool metal warming in his grasp. He looked at Carix, who was standing before him, their eyes filled with hope. In that moment, Mark knew that he was ready to take the next step. Not because he fully understood what Carix felt, or because he could immediately accept everything that was different about their worlds, but because he had finally allowed himself to trust. He had seen Carix's patience, their care, and their genuine desire to make this work, and he realized that he didn't want to let that go. "I'm ready, Carix," Mark said quietly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to take this journey with you." Carix's wings buzzed with joy, their eyes lighting up. "You are ready." "I knew it, Mark. I knew we could make this work." Mark smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. There would still be challenges ahead. There always were in any relationship, but they would face those challenges together. Carix had chosen him, and for the first time, Mark realized that maybe, just maybe, he had chosen Carix too. The days ahead were uncertain, but Mark no longer felt the overwhelming fear he once had. He was ready to walk beside Carix, not just as an alien and a human, but as two beings from different worlds, learning to build a bond of their own. As they stood there, the pendant in Mark's hand glowing faintly in the soft evening light, the future didn't seem so daunting anymore. It was just another step forward in their shared journey, one where, for the first time, Mark could see the path ahead with clarity and hope.